Welcome back to another edition, and I am super stoked to have Britt Frank with me. She is the author of The Science of Stuck and the one that has not dropped yet, Getting Unstuck. So, Britt, welcome, and why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you for having me on. I'm so excited for this conversation. So, I'm a licensed psychotherapist and I'm a trauma expert, and that's my forward facing professional credibility. The backwards facing credibility is I'm a recovering addict and just a recovering disaster of a human being. I had a great deal of difficulty coming into adulting, the whole world of adulting, paying bills, figuring out finances, figuring out how to get out of bed and not do drugs. And then through my own journey of getting well, I quit my corporate job and became a therapist. And here we are many years later. And I wrote the book because everyone gets stuck. Not everyone can say I have trauma. I mean, they can, but not everyone identifies as having trauma, but everyone knows what it's like to get stuck somewhere.
I think that's really common. We hear people say, I'm just stuck. I've said, I'm just stuck around some situation all the time, just in the same manner that people will refer to a part of me wants to do this and another part of me wants to do that. And when we add them together, I'm stuck.
Exactly.
So I'm just curious, what was your corporate job prior to becoming a psychotherapist?
Yeah, so I didn't last at it very long. I found I don't play well with others in the corporate setting, but I worked at an advertising agency and I was an account coordinator. And then I got promoted to become an account executive. And I learned that in the corporate world, you can be a hot mess behind the scenes. And as long as you hit your KPIs and turn in your work, you can still get promoted. So I had this double life going on until, as it happens, you can't really sustain that. So I had the breakdown or the breakthrough or the spiritual awakening, by whatever name you call it. I reached the end of the road, quit, got better, went back to go to school and become a therapist. I was 31 when I went to graduate school.
Wow. So you were a career changer in every sense of the word. And you hit a topic that's kind of a passion of mine. And that's that you had two jobs in the corporate world. The job of, this is what I'm hired to do. And I'm leaning on this, so that if this is incorrect, just say so. And the job of presenting who you need to be on the job, divorcing yourself from your personal life and what's really going on.
Which is a full-time job.
Exactly. And that's something in our company we try to encourage, that a person doesn't have to do that they don't have to leave their personal life at the door. And there's pros and cons to that, because sometimes I just wish, why don't we just pretend? No, it's a super good thing, but that's curious. So what motivated you to write the book in the first place, The Science of Stuck?
Yeah, and going back to your point about sometimes I wish we could go back to the not sharing everything. I think like anything, our culture has gone from leave your life at the door to vomit your life everywhere on the floor. And both extremes are equally as unhealthy. Somewhere in the middle where it's bring your personal life to work with boundaries contained and in an appropriate way is probably what we're looking for. But that's a very difficult get. So to answer your question, I wrote this book. I think everyone has a book inside them. Not everyone chooses to write it. I wrote this one because I wish I had had it when I started my healing process. Because when you're overwhelmed and stuck and just spinning around, it's really hard to figure out which book, which thing. I don't want to wade through an entire stack of personal growth self-help books because I'm overwhelmed. So the Science of Stuck is sort of a synthesis of I've read a bunch of books. Here's my show and tell. Here are just the bottom line things that I think are useful to know about habits, about families, about boundaries, about relationships. And if you want a deeper dive, I've sort of outlined a breadcrumb trail. But the Science of Stuck is not a deep dive, heavy read. The best compliments that I've received from the book are people who very proudly proclaim, I don't read. I don't read books. I don't like to read. I hate reading. And I read your book in a day. And that makes me happy.
Nice. Nice. That is a huge compliment from a non-reader. Well, you talk about in the book that there's a neuroscience and a psychology that can be applied to what happens to us when we are saying, I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So could you unpack that a little bit for us? What am I saying? What's going on when I say I'm stuck?
There's a lot going on when we get stuck. And sometimes, and this is not the neuroscience, this is more the psychology. Sometimes when we say I'm stuck, what we actually mean is I don't like my choices. I don't want to do A, B, or C because each one of those comes teed up with a set of consequences that are going to be unpleasant. But I don't like my choices is not the same as I am stuck. Stuck means you have no choices. I don't like any of these choices is a whole different dilemma. So often when people come to me and they say I'm stuck, we have to tease out, are we talking neuroscientifically you're stuck? In which case that's about the nervous system, that's about the body's protective mechanisms, or is it that you're not actually stuck, but all of your choices are terrible? And that's a whole different set of tools. But often the neuroscience shows that what we call stuckness or disorder or laziness or lack of motivation or whatever is actually the brain doing what brains are supposed to do, which is not to enhance life, it's to prevent death. And that is a very key distinction. It's not to enhance life. Your brain is there primarily to prevent your death at any cost.
Okay, so that's a lot in a few paragraphs. So how do you approach that? Okay, from what I'm hearing, there's two types of stuck. I don't like my choices, and I don't have any choices. How do you, as a psychotherapist, approach that? I assume the first thing you do is find out what type of stuck they are.
Correct. If they are the I have no choices type of stuff, and I put this disclaimer in my book, I put this disclaimer, if you follow my work, you'll see it everywhere. If we're talking the type of stuckness that comes from systemic racism, oppression, severe and persistent mental illness, global unrest, I can't help with that. That is not in my lane of tools and resources and abilities. So if you are in the stuckness that has no choices, we need a very different set of tools. I actually say in the book, if you're in an abusive situation, put my book down and here are some numbers to call because this is not the tool for that. So first we have to divvy up are we talking about no choices or are we talking about I don't like my choices? Once we divide,
no choices, to your point, would be skin color, ethnic background. It's just things that I may feel stuck because of this. Am I getting that right?
Yes and no. Well, the stuckness is not your skin color. The stuckness is systemic factors that are preventing you from ascending in your career or systemic racism and redlining in a community, things like that, things that you don't have control,
bigotry,
over. Yes,
discrimination, exactly. Because of my skin color or because of my ethnic background. Right. And your point is that it just is.
Well, it's not that it just is, but those are issues of social justice that go beyond the scope of what I'm equipped to provide. It's not that you have no choices. It's that I am not the person to provide you with tools and information. Like the somatic parts work based approach is not going to help if your partner is coming home drunk every single night, physically abusing you and keeping your finances in a state where you have no idea how much you have or what you would even need to leave. So I'm saying that when I'm talking about stuck from my lens, I'm referring specifically to situations where there are choices available to you right now. Not that we need to get a bunch of people together and advocacy, and we need to get litigators involved, and we need laws to be changed, and we need big, giant, systemic, macro level changes. There are people doing that work, and it's really important work. That's just not my lane. And I'm
Just
very,
not what you
very
do.
clear on what it's irresponsible for me to say. I can help you with all the things. And whenever I see therapists with their long list of I work with everything and everyone, I get a little twitchy because I'm like, surely you can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah, that's usually a sign of warning. In the finance world, that's the advisor who picks specific stocks by themselves and says they can cover 10 or 20,000 stocks and know which 100 you need in your portfolio. It's just like time to run away.
Exactly. So it's important when we're talking about stuckness to ascertain, are we talking systemic stuckness or are we talking personal life stuckness? So when people say, I want to quit binge eating and I'm stuck, well, it's not that you're stuck. It's that when you quit binge eating, you're going to bring up a whole bunch of other things that you may or may not be equipped to manage. And so my job is to help broaden your choices, because stuck turns into unstuck as soon as you access a choice and make it. Like the second you say yes to anything, even the wrong thing in any direction, even the wrong direction, you are no longer stuck. And so we want to get not from stuck to happy. That's a myth that keeps everyone's wheel spinning. We want to get from stuck to go. And then once we start going, then we can course correct if you're going somewhere that you don't like.
So how do you do that? I'm stuck. I have all of these choices. I don't like any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing I'm probably enveloped by fear,
Mm-hmm.
because if I can almost see a scenario choosing any of them is worse than being stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And our work, if you were my client with that situation, would be to figure out how true is it that those choices, as bad as they are worse than the bad that you're in. Because if your choices are worse than the bad that you're in, you're not going anywhere. So we want to not figure out what's good, what's bad, but of all the bad, which is the best bad? And that's the direction we want to go. If the best bad is to stay put, then that's not being stuck. That's you looking at the landscape going, I'm not ready to change my job. I'm not ready to leave my marriage. I'm not ready to quit drinking. I'm not ready to do any of those things because I'm not equipped to deal with what will happen when I do that. I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. I'm saying then that's not stuck. That's and with no shame, that's making a choice. And then our work together would be, and this is my favorite tool for any flavor of stuckness that you've got, is called the micro yes. Because often when we try to make changes too big, too fast, our brains will go, danger, 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 change equals danger, shut it down. A micro yes is the teeniest, it's even smaller than a baby step. I call it stupid small. Like it's so stupid small that it's easier to do it than to think about doing it. It's easier to do it than not to do it. And I'll give you an example. So a micro yes, if you wanted to start a savings account, would not be, let's save 10% of my paycheck. It would literally be take a penny, like cash in a dollar bill and get 3/4 and 25 pennies. Put the penny in a box. And then when you have 10, put those 10 in the bank. Doing things that small feels ridiculous, but it does allow you to maneuver without your brain putting you in a shutdown state. If you think of the Mission Impossible movies where there's like, I think it's Mission Impossible, where there's all those like laser beams and then like Tom Cruise has to maneuver underneath the laser beams without getting zapped. That's what a micro yes does. It allows you to keep moving until conditions improve. Now, people say the same thing. How am I supposed to save anything if I'm saving a penny? That's dumb. I'm like, yes, it is very dumb, but it will work faster than you doing what you're doing, which is spend, save, feel like shit, feel like crap, feel shame, repeat. So micro yeses are not very Instagrammable, but they do work because they compound, and it teaches your brain this change is safe to make, and then you can move further faster. So the pace that you start at is not the pace you stay at. It's just to get you from stuck to go.
That makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the stuckness is about, as you're describing it, about feeling safe.
Yes, exactly.
It's I've got to feel safe, and if I have whatever stories I have, whatever trauma I have around taking 10% of my paycheck, and OMG, I'm going to go broke. Just everything that can probably just whiplash on a person, right? Maybe
Yes.
Similar to a diet where I'm going to cut out all fat today.
Exactly. Anything that you do that's too, I call it brain indigestion. Whether I'm going to run 10 miles today, or I'm going to cut out carbs, or I'm going to save all of my money. Like anything you try to do that's too big is not going to work. It will get stuck, just like food gets stuck. If you try to eat a T-bone and you don't cut it into pieces, that's going to be very, very bad for your health and your life and your well-being. We have to break it down. And what a lot of people will say is, well, I think this is a small step and I don't think I should feel unsafe. So what's my problem? Why am I stuck? And the answer is you don't get to like consciously decide what should or should not count as a big step or a small step or safe or unsafe. The unconscious parts, the automatic parts of your brain, they get to make that call. So I can eat a cheeseburger and tell my stomach, you should digest this. It's going to be like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that, because digestion is automatic and you don't get to tell your stomach what to do. And very much so, the change process is the same. We've got to break it down, almost like you're dosing up on a medication. They call that titration. We have to start with these teeny, tiny, micro steps in order to build tolerance that will then enable us to go further faster.
So I see that in, for example, savings or investing, something of that sort. How would that work in one area that I see people get stuck around a lot, which would be making a will?
Yeah, like
I'm curious what is the micro step? Now, sometimes what you could have a couple and they are stuck around the choices of guardian.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not moving. But I'm thinking just for an individual, because 68% of people in the US don't have wills. I think I'm right about that.
You probably are, yeah.
Somewhere in that ballpark. What would be a micro step for something like that?
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the will thing, because a lot of people get stuck. I got stuck on it, but not because I didn't, some people get stuck because I don't want to acknowledge the reality of death. I had a part of me come up when it came to making a will. And I'll share this. It's embarrassing, but whatever. I'm not the only one. I don't care what people are stuck with after I die. Let them have to go to probate. Let them hash it out. Like, I want everyone to suffer when I'm gone, because whatever. And I'm like, wow, okay, that little part of me who doesn't want to make life tidy and easy for my loved ones after I'm gone, I had to start to reckon with that. But the nice thing about micro steps and micro yeses is you don't need to know why. So I understood my block to making a will. A lot of people will come, and I work with this in my practice, and they'll be like, I know I need to do it, and I don't know why I'm stuck. And that's when micro yeses are great. We don't need to know which part of you has which story. Let's just start with, what's a micro yes for making a will? So a micro yes for making a will would be between I need a will and I have a will. What is every single step? Is it call an attorney? So let's say call an attorney is the big one. How can you break up call an attorney into 25 smaller steps? Like do a Google search or pull up google.com and then you're done. That's your micro yes for today. Tomorrow it's pull up google.com and then type in attorneys near me. Don't even search for it. Just type it in. Then you're done with that micro yes. Then the next day you do a search. Then the next day you click on one and so on and so forth. So a micro yes is the smallest thing you can do easily. If you can't do one of the steps easily, break it down into 10 or 20 or 30 or however many smaller steps you need till you feel an easy, like, oh yeah, like that's an easy get. And you can feel it in your body when you're fighting versus when it's like, oh yeah, I could do that. No problem. That's your micro yes.
And so with somebody that maybe you've worked out this trajectory on getting a will, how do you frame that for the person as to progress? They're seeing you, they're talking to you, you've come up with this progression. Do they make a commitment to themselves that they're going to do something every day? Do you write out that list? Or do they self-monitor that when they hit resistance, they don't have to do the next step? How does that look?
Yeah, and it's different for everybody. Sometimes just the act of making a commitment is too big of a step, and that shuts people down right there. So in a perfect world, someone's brain would allow them to make a big list, like the major list. And then from that, I tell people, take one thing off that big list, put it on a Post-it note, and that's your micro yes for the day. But sometimes the very act of making the big list can be too much. And so if you can't do that, then maybe you make a list of the next 3 things. And if that's too much, then you don't make a list at all and you don't make a commitment at all. You just say to yourself in the morning, what's my micro yes for today? And that's it. And then the next day, this is very similar to the concept in AA of one day at a time. Like it's too much to look at the whole trajectory. If I had known how long therapy was going to take, I would never have done it. But I'm very glad that I did. And I'm very glad that no one told me how long it would take, even though I was like, how long is this going to take? I'm very grateful that no one gave me an answer. It takes as long as it takes. But I will say the fastest way to get unstuck is slowly. And doing these micro yeses is sustainable, much more so than trying to take big leaps and then falling into the abyss.
I love that the fastest way to get unstuck is slowly. That's great. I also, your comment about therapy, I remember when I got into my first 12-step group and people were introducing themselves, and there are two people there that said, yes, I've been here 8 years. In 7 years, I'm like, oh no, I'm signed up for life. And I'm still going 34 years later. Okay, so I get that. What you're talking about, there's a financial planner, author of the book Sudden Money, Susan Bradley, who I've had on the podcast a few months ago. And she developed something that you described to help people get unstuck when they're feeling overwhelmed. Their spouse has just died or some huge transition. And she calls it the decision-free zone. And she has them just get it all out. Everything that you've got to do. Now, it's not quite the same as creating the steps, thinking through the steps you need to do. But I suppose you could use it for that. But just get everything out of your head onto paper. Now we'll break them down into now. These have to be done now. These have to be done soon. And these have to be done later. Which can help with the overwhelm.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great life strategy, not just for grief, but I do that. That was one of the things I did learn in corporate America that a mentor taught me that I still do is I have a yellow legal pad that I vomit out every single thing on my plate. I don't break it down into now, soon, later, but I just sort of intuitively can look at it and I know which things are like need tos, and then I extract them. And then it's here's my big yucky list that I don't like to look at, but here's my today list and here's my this week list. And that does help your brain metabolize the very, very scary, never ending list of shoulds, musts, ought tos, need tos, have tos that we all have.
Yeah. So you've done a nice job of applying this to the financial world, which is where I live. I also know that you know a little bit about internal family systems therapy. Is there a way that you apply that to someone getting unstuck? Is that modality helpful?
I think there's lots of modalities that people use. I'm very partial and very biased towards internal family systems because having been a professional now for over a decade and in recovery for twice that, I've never seen anything work as fast, as efficiently, as effectively, or as sustainably as parts work and the internal family systems model version of how to do parts work. It's pretty spectacular. And I was actually quite annoyed after I got fluent in it. Like, why isn't this taught? Like, how, if I had known early on, there's a part of me that likes to spend all my money and a part of me that is mad at me for spending all my money that would prefer to save and be responsible. And here's how to have a family dialogue with those parts and how to come to conclusions and negotiations. Like, I didn't need to know how to do sine waves and whatever else we did in 7th grade math. Like, I really needed to know how my psyche was organized. And I think parts work is just the most beautiful, compassionate way. It also equips people to be their own primary source of healing. Like, I still go to therapy and I still seek out support, but I am my own healer because I know how to work with my parts. It's like going to the gym. It's nice to have a trainer, but people that work out don't need to have a trainer. It's like, save the trainer for if you're training for an event or if you need an extra boost. But we want to be able to go out for a jog or go do push-ups without depending on someone. And parts work has the same philosophy versus traditional therapy, which is you're dependent on the therapist forever. And that's not a great model.
That's a pretty strong statement coming from a psychotherapist. That's intriguing. And maybe we can visit about that in another session.
I would be delighted to.
So for our listeners, why don't you tell them just a little bit of where they can find your book that's out there and your coming book?
Yes, The Science of Stuck you can buy wherever you buy books, Amazon or any of the major retailers. The Getting Unstuck workbook, and that's a workbook. So if you don't like to read and you just want to do things and get to the nitty gritty, that's what the Unstuck workbook is. And that's available for pre-order. And you can find me on Instagram at Britt Frank or my website, scienceofstuck.com.
Great. Well, Britt, thank you so much. This has just been delightful. And hopefully we will talk again.
Part 2 coming up. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.